with you in the Midlands, BBC Radio.
Has been at the top in British show business now for more years than I think he would even care to remember. His success is not only as a performer, but also as a writer. Welcome to the Record Collectors, Marty.
Thank you, nice to be here.
Can you tell us, for our younger listener, how you started out in the music business, how it began for yourself?
Well, in the old days, it wasn't really a great deal different to the sort of situation there is today. You just, everyone was amateur. I was an amateur. And we had an amateur group, and we used to go around, do local gigs, and eventually I got spotted after about, I suppose it'd been about a year. But we were one of the early bands, one of the only bands doing rock and roll. We were sort of in on that music scene much quicker than anybody else.
Were you spotted by Larry Parnes?
I was spotted by no. There were more people involved. There was another guy called Joe Brunelli who managed me first. Joe Brunelli was a publisher, and he got me work, and he got me 2 weeks' work. And it was while I was doing work for Joe Brunelli that Larry Parnes saw me, but I didn't have a contract with Joe because I was underage.
What name were you going out at the time with your group before Larry spotted you?
I was Reg Patterson then at that time.
Can I ask you what your early influences were musically? What were you listening to in those days?
Well, I mean, I think Frankie Lane's still one of my. I love Frankie Lane. And most of the singers around at that time, there was the Guy Mitchells and Johnny Ray. I love Johnny Ray very much. But Frankie Lane was my big favourite, without a shadow of a doubt. Jezebel was a great record. I love that.
Yeah, in fact, of the two versions, you of course did Jezebel yourself. You recorded Jezebel, as I remember, and Frankie Lane's version of it. When of the two versions, I prefer your own version. I think the other it shows off the range of your voice. It's an incredibly good record. Tomorrow's Clown is my all-time favourite of your recordings.
Yeah, that was one of the records that never got anywhere, really.
It was a great record, though. Can you now just choose one of the other recordings? Can we perhaps just play one now?
Yeah, you can play Tomorrow's Clown if you like.
And that was Tomorrow's Clown for our guest tonight on the Record Collectors, Marty Wilde. What was your first introduction to the world of songwriting?
Well, when rock and roll started, that was the first time I ever started to write with a guitar, and it was just something that evolved absolutely in a very natural way. I didn't really think about it. I didn't know anything about publishing or that people could steal your songs, or people could, all those silly little things that now require lawyers and goodness knows what else to look after. But no, it started very natural ways to write. I think I wrote the B-side of my first single. And I wrote with Lionel Bart at one point as well, very early on in my career, and so I'd always been writing really. But for me, writing it still is. Has never been my first. It's not my first and foremost love.
Who chose your early material for your A-sides? Because many of the early releases were covers of American hits, which were quite well known in America. Was it like yourself? Did you have a choice whether songs presented to you? How did it happen?
They would, when I first started, they would put songs before me. If I remember rightly, I liked Honeycomb, but I had a feeling that I wouldn't make it with a record.
Jimmy Rogers, wasn't it?
Yeah. And I liked Jimmy Rogers' version, you see. And when I heard Endless Sleep, I really liked Jody Reynolds' version, but it was just one of those things. At that point, I couldn't cut records I didn't like. I used to cut Love Bug Cruel was a record I heard, and I said to them, this could be a single, but we didn't have the guys to play that kind of material,
Was there any stuff that was recorded at that time which has never seen the light of day on record?
The only material that was never seen the light of day, the majority of it was the records I made in America, which possibly they still have the tapes. Some of the material was pretty good.
Can you tell us what some of the recordings were then?
Well, one of them was, two of them were released. One was Angry, one was Little Girl. I think they were both minor hits. Little Girl was about 16, that got to, did pretty well. Angry was a fairly big hit. It was a good song. I can't remember all the titles now, but they were good. They had tremendous feel.
Can we look at those covers, though? Sea of Love and Teenager in Love. And what was your particular favourite of the early recordings? A Teenager in Love. What was your personal favourite of your early recordings?
I think Endless Sleep, because I think it was a completely different record to Jody Reynolds' version, and recently somebody in the North broadcaster played them back to back, and my version walked it. I'm not just saying, don't get me wrong, I love Jody Reynolds' version for different reasons, but mine had a kind of an ambience, an attack, a desperate sort of a feel about it.
There is a bit of snobbery about, particularly with sort of, in the 60s, British was great, but in the 50s, we were almost like second-class citizens, weren't we? I mean, if a British artist recorded something, it was automatically never as good as the American original. But that wasn't always the case.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. In the two greatest British rock records made, for me, out of all of them, was Move It by Cliff Richard and then The Sleep. They were the two rock records,
I think we should play In the Sleep now, right? Okay, we've got In the Vault, so here's In the Sleep.
Marty, can I bring you in and ask you about the Wildcats? Because, we had Brian Bennett there at one time, didn't we? And I think Licorice Locking was with you. Where did they enter into your career? Would that have been after you started making records?
Oh yeah, I had Wildcats from day one. There was always, there would always be 4 or 5 musicians playing with me. But I wanted a new band, and we held some auditions. And Jim Sullivan turned up. I don't think the guy would have ever got the job if it'd been left to Larry Parnes or anyone else, because he turned up, and I remember he'd just been fixing a car, and he was covered in oil. And it was on his fingernails, and it was over his T-shirt, and he hadn't shaved, and I thought he was brilliant. I could see exactly. I thought, yep. I said, that guy, that's it. That's my man. I said, just give me some time with him, because the problem with Jim was that his hands were so fast he could play 3 or 4 times faster than anybody in the country at rock and roll. But what he didn't have was the right feel, was the right things like that. So you had to really slow Jim down, say, Jim, play a third of those notes and it would be brilliant, which he did. But Brian Bennett, I saw Brian Bennett. Brian Bennett was playing for somebody else, I can't remember who now, and I saw Brian Bennett and I thought, I'd love you in my band. So I made an offer to Brian that he couldn't refuse it.
And Licorice?
Licorice. Again, I think Licorice was playing with Brian at the time. I think they were together. That's how we met.
Can I ask who else has been in the Wildcats over the years with you?
Well, I forget now. Sometimes I get guys, I read articles by other musicians who've done really well, and they say, I was part of the Wildcats, and I get really embarrassed because I should know them, but I don't. I guess the guy I remember most, and he wasn't in the Wildcats, he was just part of the Wild Tree, was Justin Hayward, who went on to be the Moody Blues. But I did have some brilliant guitarists with me in those early days. I had a little guitarist called Kenny Packwood, who, had Kenny been left alone to do the things that he wanted to do, would have been one of the greatest jazz players this country ever produced. He was brilliant, but he got sucked into rock and roll and diverted.
That period, though, the 50s, there wasn't, of course, a lot of British rock and roll artists about. What memories have you got of the tours that you went on that you can recall for our listeners? Because you rubbed shoulders with quite a few artists who met on Townley End, Eddie Cochran, Gene Vincent, and so forth. Have you any memories you have to share with us of those tours?
Well,
I gather they weren't particularly well paid, and lots of times on trains.
Yeah, you spent loads and loads of times on trains. We were talking about it the other day. There was one lovely thing where Larry had this huge, great blow-up photograph of me, which was about maybe 12 feet high. No, less than that. About 10 feet high and about 8 feet wide. and it was mounted on this hardboard, and it was an awful photograph of me pointing down in this stupid little satin suit, and I hated it. And he used to have it in the foyer of the tours wherever we went. As you say, we travelled everywhere by train. So after a while, obviously, it started to pick up graffiti. And there was some really gorgeous, really juicy graffiti, which I used to absolutely fall about on the floor with laughter. But it got so bad that I thought there's no way this can go in any foyer of any theatre. It was so huge. So what we did was we were at Crewe Station, I think, catching a connection, and all of us humped this thing like the horse of Troy. We humped along the stage and stood it opposite the train that we were going to catch, and we all leaned out the window, and as the train were, bye bye Marty, bye bye.
That would be a rare collector's item.
I can wonder what porter, which porter found it.
I saw you performing, I think it was either the very end of last year or the beginning of this year in a club in Sittingbourne in Kent, where it was just yourself and a small band. I think you've mentioned two of the guitarists were out of Guitar magazine. And during that show, you made a lot of very nice references to Billy Fury. I assume from those comments you made on the night that he was very, very close to you during those early years and probably was right up until his death.
Yeah, he was. We had. I knew him from, as I say. I say exactly the same thing every night on stage. I met the guy from day one, really.
Did you actually affect the introduction originally? I read somewhere that you were very much involved with actually getting this start in show business directly.
Well, no, not really. It was his own. I suppose I would have helped in a very, very small way, because Larry asked me what did I think of the material. And I said, I thought it sounded great. I said, it's absolutely marvellous. And he said, I think he's got it too. And but if I'd have said, I think it's garbage, maybe that would have changed. But I don't, Billy, it was Billy's own, he was his own man, and it was his own efforts that made his success. Because he went on stage that night. Larry pushed him on stage the very night that he only came with a guitar to play us songs.
Well, this is the Isolde in Birkenhead, was that?
At the Isolde in Birkenhead. And over the years, there were times we toured. I did an awful lot of early touring with Billy. We did a summer season together. We toured later on together in the 70s. We did and he was on, when they did My This Is Your Life, he was on that, which was the last TV appearance he ever made. So we, by and large, there were times, there was one particular period when we didn't get on too well, and that was just because somebody outside of our relationship had told lies that weren't true about me, and he believed them. He thought they were true, and he found out afterwards. He realised that he was wrong. And other than that, we'd been great, and we were right to the end.
That does happen. People can be friendships, don't they?
Yeah, sure. But at the end, that was a different thing. And if you watch the rerun of I've got a copy of My This Is Your Life. If you watch my reaction to Billy as compared to the others, you'll know which one I favoured. It shows in that show.
Did you ever do any private recordings with people like Billy? He was on a different label to you, but being so close, did you ever get together and do anything that may have been put down on tape?
I cut some tracks with Billy, but I did more in A&Ring. I did some A&Ring for Billy. In fact, I think we used someone. I'm sure Jimmy Page, someone like that, was one of the guitar players. Went on to become.
And is that stuff still in existence somewhere?
It probably is. Yes, I think it's probably been released 1,000 times already, because there's all sorts of strange labels with his name on and things. But I don't, I can't pass going up.
Could we talk about your involvement with the stage and things like Bye Bye Birdie and other things that you're involved in? What memories have you got of that period of your career?
Well, it was a very challenging.
Ahead of its time, actually, in a way, wasn't it? As it so happens, that particular. It was a parody of Presley, wasn't it? That's the way it is, sort of thing, in a way.
Yeah, it was. It was a parody of Presley. There's no doubt about that. But it was an extremely good musical. The songs were great. I listened to the album the other week, and it was a very, very, very good show. Great fun to be in. And again, it was a show that I had to have a colossal discipline in the show. I was taught to make up. Oh, funny, strange enough, I don't make up anymore. But they taught me. My makeup used to take about half an hour, 40 minutes, and I had to get in before the show about 2 or 3 hours to get settled in as that person, because it was like very Stanislavski. You had to get in and feel the part and make up and do the whole bit. And there was a lot of discipline involved, and that was good. That was really good for me.
Were you in Paint Your Wagon as well?
No, that was only I did one of the songs from Paint Your Wagon.
On one of the albums, I noticed in my own collection, it's got your name for one of the tracks.
Yeah, the funniest thing with that one is that really was a send-up of what's his name? I've forgotten. The good guy who's in Paint and Place.
Lee Marvin.
No, not Lee Marvin. No, the singer.
Sorry,
the singer who's now an actor in the. The big bass voice guy. I forgot that.
Our listeners will be saying that's who it should be.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, it was a send-up. I was really sending him up on that track.
Can we just quickly move on, because I know you're on stage very shortly. I'd like to ask you a question about a song called Abergavenny, a place I always seem to be passing through, in fact, regularly, in fact, even today. You wrote the song about Abergavenny, Michael. The origins of that song, because wherever in that part of the world I tend to break into that song, it wasn't a big hit here, but you had albums named after Abergavenny, in Australasia and all over the place, didn't you?
Yeah, it was a very big success in America as well.
Yeah.
It was a colossal turntable here. I mean, it was. It didn't mean much here, but I think the only thing I'd like to hear would be. I'd like to hear someone do a really nice brass band arrangement, because it was designed. That's what it was written for, was a brass band. But that's another story.
Yes. Any more anything you're writing at the moment that we can hear, or anything in the pipeline, or anything we can give a play to that's more recent that you've composed?
No, I haven't written for over a year and a half now, not properly. And the last song that you can play that I wrote, the very last song that I ever wrote was 4-letter word, and that was a hit. And I suppose if you could at least stop writing on a high note,
I think we should give that a spin. On behalf of our listeners, the time has beaten us. Marty Wilde, thank you for enlightening us, and even more, thank you for the music.